So, hello, welcome back to the second video today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the A1 Mark II and the dial setup that I've been using. And the reason why I'm bringing this up because I think there are some interesting new features. And yeah, I'm assuming you, like me, have the camera for a short while or are still waiting for it. And it might be interesting to see what you can do. Um, like most of these things, people are quite, I wouldn't say stuck, but used to their camera layout, which kind of makes sense because you know where all the buttons is and your muscle memory kicks in. But it also means that if you have to set up the camera again, because you can't load in the old setup, you have to configure all the buttons, and on Sony it's quite a lot of work. So it's also a good moment, especially now that you can load and save your settings to play around with them. And for me, it started basically because I want to give a place to some of the new features that we are having, so the pre-cap settings and stuff like that. But also because one of the dials, so this dial, which I kind of always disliked that we could not program it, is now programmable. So it was first always the exposure dial, which I don't use that often. And if I want to use it, I think it's okay if it's a little bit harder to get at. I will show you how I did it. I want to use it for something more useful, at least in my mind. So of course, if you start changing that dial, then you have to figure out some of the other dials and kind of how to make sense. So I'll start with showing you the trick about the dials, which I think is interesting. And maybe we'll end up showing all the dials and all the buttons that I've set up just as a result of that. So let's go. So the first thing that I want to show you what I actually put on this dial, and then we can sort of talk about the downsides and the upside. So yeah, I'm in a certain focus mode, and what I have decided to program on this dial, which I will show a little bit later how you can do that, is put my focus modes there. So you can see, you can program which ones you want to see, but you can see I can go from wide all the way down to the small point. And that means that if I have the camera up to my eye, it's extremely quick to change focus mode that I want. I think that's for me much more useful than using it as exposure compensation. But of course, if you want to have focus compensation, where do you leave it? So that's the main trick I want to show you, because programming this dial, I'm assuming you can do, is in the menu, you can program your dials. But how do I now get to my exposure comp? Of course, I can use it to the touchscreen, etc., etc. But I've decided to reuse the C3 button. And what you can now do, which was also possible on the older cameras, so I would say about 50% of the Sony cameras are able to do this. You can program your dials to be only active the moment you press on a button. And I will show two use cases of me using that and where to set it up. And then we might go into the other dials. So basically, I would call it a shift key. So the idea is that if you press this shift key, then other functions become available. And you can see if I press the C3 button, which if I don't block the view, if I press the C3 button, you can see on the screen quite clearly symbols popping up telling me what is being activated. So in this case, since this is now my focus mode, but if you can see, if I press the C3 button, I can still do compensation. It's now focusing on my hand, so maybe it's better if I do it like this. Oh, come on, camera focus. You can see what I'm trying to do, right? So hopefully it will work like this. And you can see if I now change it, we can still do focus compensation. I just have to press the button. And if I don't, then it becomes the focus. See, but I can still do compensation if I want. Let me put it back on 0. So that's basically the trick. And of course, you can program all the dials. So if I press this, all the other dials also get a new function. So for example, if I press it, you'll see that the main dial now I can set which, I forgot what the name is, which display mode or whatever it is called. You can set, so you can set it on black and white and stuff like that. Sometimes even if you're shooting in RAW, it's nice to see the viewfinder or your LCD in black and white if you want to take a black and white shot, and this is how you can simulate it. So again, you can program all the dials if you hold the shift down. So let me show you how to set it up. So if you go to your settings, and you can customize dials. You can actually do it in two ways. I will show you, I wouldn't make the more complex way, but the way that you most likely will do it. You'll go to customize buttons, so I'll press this button, and then you can press the button directly which one you want to program. So let's assume I want to program this, and it will show you what is now programmed on it. And here you can already see the main trick. You can see my dial during hold. So basically what it will do, if I press the button, it will activate what I've programmed in the my dial during hold function. So if I press on this and go into it, you can see, yes, indeed, that's what has been programmed on. I could have put it on something. I can toggle between the dials, but I decided to activate them when I'm holding it. So you can also actually define a toggle so that you can actually change your dials, 3 or 4 dials, and then 3 setups, as you can see. So there's 12 options, but I do it on the hold down because I think that's more fun. So I can press this one, and then you can see what is currently programmed under this button. And I can change it. You can see that I've put the flash compensation on one dial, the focus compensation, or the exposure compensation on the other dial, control creative look, that was the word I was looking for. And on the top dial, I said that the shutter speed, but only a small step. So that's handy in some cases. So that's what is on there. And indeed, you can see that normally this in the it is the focus mode. This I put always on my ISO. I just like it there. But if I press the button, you can see I can do flash compensation or the normal compensation. So yeah, hopefully this was the main trick. Let me also show you another place where it's very useful, the same basic trick. You have to go to video mode, but if I go to video mode, I don't like, let me also turn this off for a second, auto framing. So I don't like that all my dials are active in that I can by mistake change the settings. So I'm now on 320, which I might not want to be. I might be at want to be at 50. So I would like to change my shutter speed, but I want to be careful that I don't change some of the dials while I'm recording. So basically I want to lock them. So I decided to remove everything from the main dials and just put them on nothing. But if I press the button, you can see I can change the different values. Here you can see I can change the aperture. I'm on aperture, so let me put it on manual. That explains a little bit why it was doing that. So you can see it's now on 40, 48 actually. And but I can change it if I press down this button. I can change the different settings, right? So I can, for example, here I can change the frame rate I'm on, and I put it on really slow values, the step values, so that I can precisely set it. So it's now precisely on 50. But if I now use it, nothing happens. So I need to press the button to activate it, and then I can change it. So the same thing with the front dial. I can only change the aperture in this case if I press the button. Sorry about the focus. I'll try to keep it in focus. But you can see I cannot change it. Maybe if I do it like this. It's always fun to make a video, but you can see it only activates, in this case, the ISO, if I press the button, which I think is a very useful feature for video. So that's kind of the way that I set up the dials. So let's go back to photo mode and maybe just run around the camera and talk about the other options, because that was the main trick I wanted to show. So just show you what I've set on the different buttons, because this one starts shifting, then this one starts shifting, etc., etc. So this is now default my focus mode, but you notice that I'm not going through all of them. You can actually program them in the menu which ones you want to see. So there's a list, and you can turn quite a few of them off and only put the ones that you wanted to cycle through, which you like. Now, one thing you notice that you don't see any tracking variants. Normally you have a whole list, and some of them are tracking and some of them are not tracking, and you can see that I've only put the tracking, the non-tracking ones there. Why? Because I programmed this button, the AF on, because I don't use back focus anymore, to actually go into the same mode, but then AF on, if that makes sense. So let's say I'm in a small one, so small dot, and I want to normally focus. that's fine, will work, as you can see. But if I press this button, it will automatically go there in focus mode, starting from the point where I'm on. Hopefully that makes sense. So if I'm in a wider, so wide, and I press it, it will start focusing using that as a beginning point. So that means that basically I am in the same focus mode, but if I press this button, it will automatically go into tracking within the same mode. So if you're spot mode, it will go in spot mode. If you're wide, it will start tracking from wide, etc., etc. Which I think is very useful. So that's this button. Now on this button, I programmed which recognition it does. So of course you can put it on auto now, and auto is quite handy, but it doesn't always give the best results, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you have mixed things, you have people and dogs and whatever in the picture, you might want to be more precise because the camera doesn't know what you actually want to focus. It will try to focus the one in the middle, but even then it's handy and also faster if you don't put it on auto, but you can go to the specific one. Now you can see that I have only put 4 options in there, and I would love if Sony put also off there, but they don't. So I'll get back to another button for that. But you can see this button is now me selecting the target. Now if you still want to have all the options, that can still be done. I've put it as in the FN menu. You can see that there are still here I have all the options. So if I once in a while want to detect a plane, I can still do it. It's just not on this button, so that's kind of it, right? So hiding a little bit which one are further away from me. So the downside is that with this cycle button, which you can set up, again in the menu you can select that, and you can also decide which one you want to have in the list, is that you you don't have an off option. I would love if Sony built in that you can long press it and it would then go off. That would be nice if they start using the long press, but because you can use it for other functions, but you can't. So I had to program a special button if you don't want to have any tracking going on, because sometimes it works against you, and I've decided to put it on the record button. So you can see that if I press that, you can see there that it jumps on off. So it does not track subject anymore. So Patrick Murphy was talking about that if you're some sports, it does not really work that well. You want to be in the old mode, old normal mode or old tracking mode, but not subject detection. So this is a quick way to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And then of course here you can rotate between the different types. Quite handy for this setup. So we talked about this button, and this button. Now the dials we kind of already talked about, but just to repeat, this is because I'm in manual. What you can also do is there's now a different setting for your manual mode and the other modes for your dials. So you can split them not only between photography and movie, but you can also split them in manual or any other mode. So basically they understand that if you're a manual, you want to probably set up your dials differently because you want to, for example, do both your shutter speed and your aperture and your ISO. So let me put it back into A mode, and you will see that this button starts doing something else. You can see that it now does my ISO over here. Let me put it back to auto. The dial next to it we already talked about. That's my focus area. The front dial you can see is my aperture, unless of course the lens is doing it. And the back dial I turned off because I'm always afraid that I touched it by mistake. Again, if I do shift, which we already talked about, then you can see I can use it to change my creative look. So, but at least it's protected because I have to press the shift. So that's the dials and the top buttons. The two, of course, the nice thing about the focus area, by the way, of course, you can lock it, right? So that's the good new feature that you can use. Then, of course, the front button, let me do that first, of course, is the burst mode we already talked about. Then the C1 button we already talked about, that's the pre-capture. And since I'm considering shooting always in low burst, so that we can take one picture, which I showed in the previous video, hold it for slower, or already press the C5 button and go quick. That's kind of what I'm trying to get used to. That means that I need to be able to turn the pre-capture on and off, which you can see I've put on the C1 button. And on the C2 button, I always want to use a my auto minimum speed, so that if you're in A mode, that you kind of pick something useful, and you might want to change that quickly. So I've put it on the C2 button. Then, well, the C3 button we already talked about. Then we only have these buttons left here. Going left, I always put my silent on off. So do we hear something or don't we hear something? Up is you can't program it. As you know, that's the display modes. You can tune which ones you want, but not more. ISO on this side I kind of removed, and I've put a touch operation on. So can be quite kind of handy. So you can see that if I turn it on, I actually didn't do that now, but of course now you can shift these in. But it also remembers that. So what's really nice about it, that if you have it like this, you can actually sort of activate the screen, but at the same time also let these menu pop up. And now of course you can use the touch panels for the lower side, but you don't always want it. So I put it here. If I press it by mistake, it's not a big deal because most likely I'm not touching the screen. So um, I put it on this one. And then the down one, I forgot what I put it on. I think this is on widening, but let me check. So it have to be in single mode. On continuous AF. I can't be in continuous AF. I am in single shot. I am in. What is it complaining about? Oh, it's not available in single shot AF. See, that's what happens if you don't prepare. I was not setting another. Now let me see what's on there. So we go into the menu. Let's turn it around. Go to key settings, and then press the button, which is handy because then you know what it is. So go left, and oh, yeah, it's on brightening, monitor brightening, so that it's not working because I don't know. Not at the moment, but it is on brightening so that you can brighten up the screen if it's really dark. I'm kind of stumped why it's not working at the moment. I'm pretty sure there's a reason for it. So that's kind of, I think, all the buttons. Oh yeah, maybe also the magnification that I put it on, that it automatically goes to the first step. You can also control that a bit. And I think the button on the side, I always put it on crop or no crop mode. So I think that's about it. I'm just gonna showing you the more other button layout, so that you might give you an idea of what you can do with these buttons. Because I think almost everybody will rethink when they get a new camera and they have to set it up anyway from the beginning, how you can possibly set it up. And there's a lot of good manuals out. I'm not saying this is the way that you should do it, but it might give you one or two small ideas on what you can do. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.